morning. Thank you all for being here today. My name is Jonathan Covey, and I'm the Policy Director for Texas Values. And we, together with our good friends at Louisiana Family Forum, are hosting this press conference in New Orleans in front of the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals Courthouse. And today there will be important constitutional questions that will determine whether states will be able to acknowledge our nation's history and moral obligations through the display of the Ten Commandments in public schools. For generations, the Ten Commandments have appeared in courthouses, schools, and public spaces across America, not as an establishment of religion, but as a recognition of the legal and moral heritage that has shaped our system of law. The Supreme Court has now clarified that Establishment Clause cases must be evaluated through a lens that illuminates the history and tradition of the United States. And both the Texas and the Louisiana Ten Commandments laws easily meet that test. It is up to the Fifth Circuit to move out of a lemon-flavored past and clarify that the Establishment Clause was never designed to constrain the states. The Establishment Clause was written to constrain the federal government from giving preference to any one denomination over another, and we believe that this is clear in today's hearing. We are grateful for the leadership in the Texas House and the Senate and the authors of the Texas Ten Commandments law, Representative Candy Noble and Senator Phil King. And before we hear from our next speaker, I want to read a statement from Senator Phil King, who couldn't be with us today, but provided a statement to be read on his behalf. When the Ten Commandments passed, when the Texas legislature passed the Ten Commandments law, this is stated, we did so to acknowledge a foundational part of our legal and historical tradition. The Ten Commandments are not a new or controversial presence in American life. They are depicted in the books, reflected in early American law, and long recognized as a source of core legal principles like prohibitions on murder, theft, and perjury. The moral influence of the Ten Commandments is profound and beneficial to society. From the very beginning, our nation has openly acknowledged the role the Ten Commandments have played in shaping our laws and civic life. Recognizing the Ten Commandments for their historical influence fits squarely within our constitutional tradition, as I've detailed in my amicus brief with Representative Noble and Texas Values to the court. I am confident the Fifth Circuit will apply that framework faithfully and reach the constitutional understanding. Senator, that's been about, and that is clarity, constitutionality, and confidence about our nation's history. Now it is my privilege to introduce the president and attorney for Texas Values, Jonathan Saenz, and Jonathan has been at this work and at the forefront of defending religious liberty in Texas and works every day to make sure that our courts and our laws stay grounded in the Constitution and not political pressure. Jonathan Saenz.
Thank you. Jonathan Saenz, president and attorney for Texas Values. It's great to be here today with so many great colleagues and patriots that want to make it clear that we are confident that the United States Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals will uphold the Texas Ten Commandments law because the law is clearly constitutional. It's also been a joy and a pleasure and an honor in our legal amicus brief before the United States Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit to represent the authors of the Texas law, Senator Phil King and Representative Candy Noble. You know, we couldn't do the work we do, and we wouldn't have laws in place like this without representatives in the Senate and the House to pass these laws. Our Speaker, Dustin Burrows, also our Lieutenant Governor, Dan Patrick, that were so key to this issue, and the great support from our Governor, Greg Abbott. But this should be an easy case for the Court of Appeals. And we're glad that the entire court is taking a look at this because we know that that is just another way of acknowledging how important the Ten Commandments are to the historical and traditional foundations of American law and policy. And that's what this case and these laws are about, not only from Texas, but from Louisiana. It's about restoring and preserving the historical significance and the traditional value that the Ten Commandments have in American law and policy and have always had. We know there's new Supreme Court precedent from 2022 that should also make it clear that the court is in a position to rule the right way and not to be hostile to symbols of America's founding just because they're religious in nature. Now, if you follow the analysis from the opposition, and it's no surprise that the ACLU would try to tear down these Ten Commandments posters, but they're using a faulty and an outdated standard that would allow someone who is just offended or disagrees with these historical symbols to be able to control what's in the public school classroom and require us to overreact. And in many ways, what's called a heckler's veto. The Supreme Court has been very clear that is not the analysis to use moving forward. And I think that the judges, and I'm confident the judges will get it right. But this issue is very easy and simple. When we look at places that the Ten Commandments are displayed, you have to look no further than the U.S. Supreme Court. I was in the Supreme Court last week, and I was able to look up and see, just like anyone can if you go online, there is a depiction of Moses and the Ten Commandments in the U.S. Supreme Court. Since it's good enough for the Ten Commandments to be displayed in the U.S. Supreme Court, that should leave no doubt that it's constitutional and appropriate for the Ten Commandments to be displayed in public school classrooms. Now, it's also important to note that the only thing that the court is deciding today for the state of Texas is only 25 school districts in the state of Texas that this ruling will apply to. The rest of the 1,175 school districts, they must follow the law, which is to have the posters displayed in those public school classrooms right now. They are affected in no way by this small amount of number, 25 school districts that have challenged the Texas Ten Commandments law and that the court is going to be looking at today. And so we'll be in the courtroom briefly. We'll have a briefing later too on what's going to be happening. And we're grateful for our Texas Attorney General's office led by Ken Paxton for defending and advocating for the Texas Ten Commandments law today. So I'm going to bring back Jonathan Covey for our next speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Sines. It's now my pleasure to introduce another fierce advocate for the Ten Commandments laws here in Louisiana, the president of Louisiana Family Forum, Gene Mills.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you. It's an honor to be here today to stand on behalf of what we believe is authentic American history. I applaud the efforts of the Louisiana legislature, Governor Jeff Landry, our Attorney General Liz Murrill, as well as our Solicitor General, to restore within public education an understanding of the historical role the Decalogue has played in America's experiment in liberty. Louisiana Family Forum recognizes these timeless principles as foundational to the flourishing of a nation, of a state, and of its people. LFF was privileged to assist the author, Representative Dodie Arden, during the legislative process. Our goal was to ensure that the bill was written in a manner consistent with the Constitution and current case law. Recent Supreme Court decisions, such as Kennedy, as has mentioned before, has changed the legal landscape. The lemon law has been declared a lemon. And now there's a new test. And that test is whether or not discrimination is inherent and is going to be accepted with regard to religious expression. In the Kennedy case, the U.S. Supreme Court affirmed the right of a high school football coach to prayerfully, quietly kneel on the 50-yard line and to offer thanks and prayers before the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. It made an important change to the constitutional law, returning to a more common sense reading of the First Amendment. The court abandoned the lemon test, which had previously been used in a form of discrimination. By the Supreme Court's rejection of that test, it eliminates that inherent bias against religious expression. This set a major precedent, and it's why we're here today. During the legislative process, we consulted with religious liberty experts in Louisiana, like Alliance Defending Freedom across the nation, Wall Builders, First Liberty, and others, to craft language that was most likely to withstand SCOTUS scrutiny. The bill includes language to ensure that no public expenditure of funds can take place, and that the Decalogue would be presented in the context of other documents central
to Western civilization and American history. There was little opposition in our committee hearings and in floor debates. House Bill 71 passed by both houses by a supermajority. Louisiana Family Forum has been privileged to assist in securing the funding, the printing, and the distribution of posters throughout Louisiana. Nearly 60 parishes of the 64 parishes have already received their posters, many of which have been put into place. Superintendents are on notice from the Attorney General's office that this is the law of the land until further notified. This generation is hungry for clarity, for direction, and for meaning that can only be found in our authentic foundational principles. We believe that children, families, and Louisiana will be enriched by restoring the Ten Commandments to its place of honor within the public education system. The moral code outlined in the Decalogue, such as do not lie, do not steal, do not cheat, honor your mother and your father, amongst other principles, is what Western civilization was founded upon. It transcends simple religion. It has significant secular and historical purpose that affords guidance for human flourishing. Louisiana Family Forum celebrates the restoration of the Decalogue to its proper place in American history, jurisprudence, and public education. We're confident the Ten Commandments Act will be vindicated, that Louisiana and Texas children, and ultimately children across America, will benefit from these timeless truths. We're honored to help write the next chapter of Louisiana and American history. Thank you.
Thank you, Gene. Appreciate those words. It's now my pleasure to introduce to you the president of Family Research Council and former Louisiana State Legislator, Tony Perkins.
Thank you, and thank you, Gene. I want to thank the leadership of Louisiana and Texas for bringing us to this point, which I think is a pivotal moment, and the timing is not lost on us as we move to the 250th anniversary of our country to rediscover the very foundation of our nation. There's a lot of talk about making America great again. Well, America must first be good again, and that moral foundation is found in the Ten Commandments. I know one of the arguments that's been made is that this is a violation of separation of church and state, that somehow this is going to coerce children in terms, it's religious coercion. That's hard to imagine that posting a poster of the Ten Commandments on the wall of classrooms is somehow coercive. I mean, if, as Gene was just mentioning, if a child happens to read the words, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, will our country be the worse for that or the better for that? Again, this is the foundation of our country. You go to Washington, D.C., you look in the Capitol and Supreme Court, and you see the lawgiver. You see Moses. And we understand the importance of the Ten Commandments to our judicial system. And so I commend the state of Louisiana, my former colleagues in the legislature, the Family Forum, Texas Values, for advancing this. And I want to commend the Attorney General of the state of Louisiana, Liz Murrill, and the governor for being all in on advancing this. And I look forward to a positive outcome. May go all the way to the Supreme Court, but I think the foundation upon which the state of Louisiana and other states that are advancing this fundamental document, they stand on solid ground. And so I am pleased to be here today. We filed an amicus brief in support of the state of Louisiana, and again, look forward to a very positive outcome.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins. On behalf of the Louisiana Family Forum and Texas Values, we want to thank you for attending, and this concludes our press conference. Thank you so much for attending. Oh, yes, and for more information on this issue, you can check TenCommandmentsTexas.com for information on the history and tradition of the Ten Commandments. Thank you. This concludes our press conference.